Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys enjoyed that first segment. Before we get into who had the short end of the stick concerning the running back position, I do want to remind you yet again that if you do feel so inclined, please consider leaving a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud. It is a huge support to both me and my fellow podcasters, and ultimately the network as a whole. You can also leave any questions, comments, or concerns with the show, and they will be addressed at the beginning of the next episode. Without further ado, let's jump from the highest of highs in terms of strength of schedule to the lowest of lows at the running back position. Now, these aren't guys who I don't necessarily think will not be good. This is just based off of when I look at their schedules, when I look at their situations, I don't necessarily see a path where these guys are truly guys who are going to be immediately guys who pop out in terms of that strength of schedule. And so without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off with a guy moving from Buffalo, where he was in a bit more of a comfortable running back situation, to now the New York Giants, where he could find himself getting a lot of touches because the less we say about the Giants' offense, the better. But it is steadily improving. We're going to talk a little bit about Devin Singletary. As the new Giants running back, he has the worst schedule. And I think the ultimate path for Devin Singletary to overcome that is he's going to have to win within division. That's going to be very hard because each and every single team in that division now seems a little bit more loaded than the Giants. Even the Washington Commanders, who have faith in Jaden Daniels and have really kind of acquired so many different players on the offensive side of the ball who can contribute immediately. Then, of course, it's the Eagles and the Cowboys, and everyone's looking up at them in that division. And so it's going to be tough, but Devin Singletary is going to have to find a way early. There is a stretch of games where from weeks 15 to 17 he could find himself getting some touches. He plays the Ravens, the Falcons, or the Colts later in the season. And ultimately, in the AFC North, you're not going to find many wins. So, when I look at Devin Singletary, I look at a guy who perhaps can receive a lot of touches early on, depending on how Daniel Jones' rapport with his prospective wide receiver one, Malik Neighbors, goes. But at the end of the day, when you're playing an AFC division as tough as the AFC North, I'm really scared for your chances at a running back. And when you play in a division that's starting to become a two-horse race like the NFC East, it's going to be tough to win interdivisionally. And so Devin Singletary is in a really weird situation where he can be in a situation where he's required to receive a lot of touches, but his schedule does not necessarily positively impact what he's going to do with those touches. And so I think that at the end of the day, you have to shy away from a guy like Devin Singletary and focus on someone else, because right now the Giants' running back situation and their schedule to boot does not look very comfortable. And then we go to another guy who not only has to play AFC North, he's required to because he is in the AFC North. That is Najee Harris. Third toughest schedule. And the thing I think about with Najee Harris is that he definitely is in a good situation. There's balance in that Pittsburgh Steelers running back room between himself and Jaylen Warren. But even though he's a starter, he plays more like a power back. Jaylen Warren's the more explosive of the two, I would say. And you're not really getting much help out of your receiving core. We talked about the Steelers' receiving core in depth and how thin they really are. They're going to be relying on Pickens and Pat Freiermuth a lot. And so I think that while it could positively impact the number of touches Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren receive, I don't necessarily think that it's going to matter because you're always going to be playing from behind when you're in the AFC North. It's tough now because the AFC North is a division that predicates itself on beating up on the weakest team in it, and that right now is probably Steelers. You can say that their defense can keep them in games, but it's not going to matter if the offense can't get clicking. Najee Harris should be relied upon a lot more often, but I feel like by going out and getting two guys in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields who kind of contrast each other, where one's more of a deep passer and one's more of a runner, then that kind of takes away the value of Najee Harris. If Russell Wilson starts, he might be wanting to throw the ball more downfield, get a lot more things going that way. And if you're Justin Fields, then a lot more RPOs can be implemented, and that takes away some of the touches. And you have to kind of consider Justin Fields as another rusher because of the value he adds there. And so when I look at Najee Harris, I see a solid back who can pick up good yardage. But the question is, will he be relied upon often, and in what form? Because both of these quarterbacks aren't necessarily going to help him improve his game. Russell Wilson certainly is not someone I think of helping running backs. In Denver, Javonte Williams became a star by necessity because Sean Payton really struggled to get Russell Wilson going in those early stages of his career as a Denver Bronco. And so I don't think I can say the same about Najee Harris, especially in a very tough division. And now let's switch to a guy who's back in Dallas. A guy who had a good start to his career in Dallas, but now is not necessarily coveted as often. And so Ezekiel Elliott is going to have one of the tougher schedules for any running back in this league. Now, there's a lot to like about Zeke. I don't necessarily think that he got off on the right foot with the Patriots, and that's kind of why a lot more teams don't necessarily want him. But coming back to the Cowboys, I feel like he's in a good environment. But when you consider the fact that Mike McCarthy really is not a run-first head coach, you consider the fact that the Cowboys also play the AFC North. They play Cleveland week 1. That's going to be a tougher test than people think. The Ravens week 3. You definitely are going to have to focus a lot more on getting ahead of those teams. And it feels like the Dallas Cowboys have become a little more reliant on Dak in recent years. I think that Dak has gotten a lot more touches in the offense, but then again, the receiving core is not necessarily as deep as you would expect out of an NFC and quote-unquote Super Bowl contender. So that should work out for Zeke. I just don't see a path where Mike McCarthy's fully comfortable with integrating Zeke into the system. I kind of like Zeke as a kind of a gadget back. That's what I kind of group him and lump him into. He's kind of that gadget back who can get going in many different ways. He can be utilized in many different ways. And so, while he has a tough schedule, I think that Dallas really needs to rely upon him. Because at the end of the day, who knows what the Dallas Cowboys' identity is truly going to be. It can be predicated on getting Dak a comfortable position passing, but it can also be predicated on getting Zeke going, because there needs to be more variation. That's the thing I think about with the Dallas Cowboys. If you're so reliant on Dak, then how are you kind of mitigating for the yards you can get from a running back? And so I think they feel as if Zeke can be a valuable asset. They just have to prove it. At the end of the day, when I kind of sum up all of these running backs, we kind of got the short end of the stick. None of these guys are truly stars, quote unquote. But they're not necessarily in situations where they're not going to get touches. When I think about the Giants, yes, you got Malik Nabers to get Daniel Jones going, to give him a solid wide receiver one. But it doesn't gloss over immediately the fact that your wide receiver room is still kind of in a weird position. You have one guy who you're relying on who's a rookie, nonetheless, and just a bunch of role-playing guys that Daniel Jones probably won't trust. And to top it all off, Daniel Jones is coming back from injury. So why not give it to Devin Singletary? You know your schedule is tough, so why not? So I'm not saying these guys, in terms of touches, aren't going to succeed. So who knows what these guys can be. I don't think they're necessarily quote-unquote losers based off situations. I just think that people think that their strength of schedule is going to be much tougher than expected. And when you look at Najee Harris, he's in a situation where he's in a fantastic running back room. Both of these guys set each other up so well. Both him and Warren complement each other so well. But both of the quarterbacks they brought in aren't necessarily going to help their case. You have a deep ball passer and a quarterback who's more comfortable rushing than passing. So, by fate of circumstance, Najee Harris is now not as coveted as he would be. And then Zeke Elliott, he's very up in the air because a lot of teams didn't want him. The Cowboys scooped him up. He's back with McCarthy, who's more of a pass-first kind of guy. And so, I just feel that you don't necessarily have to look at it as strength of schedule. You have to look at it as if these guys are going to be used properly. Because if they are, then they have a chance to overcome their short end of the stick schedules. And if they do that, then who knows? Maybe roles will reverse where some of these winners kind of fall into the losers category. Because the winners kind of are on teams that are a little more settled than the Giants, Steelers, and the Cowboys. They're technically more settled than the Giants and Steelers, but still, they kind of fall apart at the end. But you know what I mean. That will just about do it for this segment of today's show. Kind of as we go to the QB position and look at some winners in that situation. And they might be guys you have not suspected would be as good. We'll be right back after the break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having